welcome to Friday's science session. So today we are going to be building on what we did yesterday when we were grouping animals and looking at their characteristics, and we're going to look at actually classifying them. So on the left here we have actually got a classification key that's put together on sweets. Okay, so what I want you to do is have a look, have a think about this classification key and what do you notice about the way it's put together. So pause the video and have a think. Okay, so hopefully you will notice that every single sweet that is listed at the top appears at the bottom. So every sweet at the top, every possible answer is an actual answer. You've probably noticed that the questions are only yes or no answers, which could be something that you fit into your classification, so yes or no answers. We're thinking about the way it looks mainly, so is it square, is it round, is it pink and black? And hopefully you notice that at the end of each answer there is an option, so it either gets to the sweet or it gets to another question, and eventually at the bottom there are no more questions and it's just the sweets as the answers. So this grid has this picture has classified the sweets into groups, and so you can work out which sweet it is talking about by following through the answers. And you've probably done quizzes and things like that already online that do a similar sort of thing. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do something a little bit harder than classifying sweets. So what I want you to do now is we were going to look at this book called One of a Kind in School, which is all about sorting and classifying things. I've recorded me reading it and showing you, and the link, it was linked underneath this one on the web page. So I would suggest that you pause the video now, go and have a listen to that one and have a close look at each of the pages. What does it classify? What do you notice? You might want to pause it to have a closer look. So watch that one and then come back to this one to carry on with the lesson. Okay, so how can we classify living things? So living things can be classified using a classification key like this one that's on the screen. And this is a similar sort of classification to the sweet one, except this time we are looking at animals. So does it have 4 legs? Yes. So we're looking at a cat. No. Does it have more than 4 legs? Yes. Does it live on land? Yes. No. Does it have feathers? Yes. No. So you will notice that there is always something at the end of one of the options. So it's either the final animal or it's another question. There is also only ever 2 lines drawn out. So there's only ever a yes or a no drawn out from each question. And then depending on what animals you're talking about, then it might lead to another question that will branch out like this one. But each animal that you've chosen will end up as an answer. Okay, which is really important to remember because you're going to make your own classification key like this one. So what we are looking at is all to do with a man called Carl Linnaeus. And in 1735 he was a scientist and he published something called Systema Naturae, which explained a way to classify living things. So he put all living things into 3 groups called kingdoms. So you had the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the mineral kingdom. And we looked a little bit at the animal kingdom yesterday. And then so he put them into 3 main groups. And then each kingdom was split into smaller levels, sort of like what we just had a look at. Scientists still use this system today, and as more species have been discovered since his lifetime, so extra categories have been added. So the system looks like this. Now, you don't need to worry too much about the fancy names of the scientific systems, but you just need to focus on the fact that it starts with one big group and then it splits down into smaller groups until you eventually end up with one thing. So each level gets smaller until there's only one living thing in the species section. So it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you finally have one thing at the bottom. So like we looked at our sweets, for our animal, it always ended up with one animal as each option at the bottom, which is something that we're going to look at. So if you have a look, this is how the cat is classified in his system. So it's classified in a sort of triangular shape. Again, we've got the fancy words, scientific words for order along the left, and then we've got words along the right. Now, animal kingdom is what this means, and then this means that we're looking at mammals. So it starts off with a big group here at the bottom, and as it goes up the triangle, up the scale, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we end up with a cat at the top. So the cat being the answer, if you want to look at it that way. So what I would do is pause the video and have a closer look at this system and think about what the groups might be depending on what animals are in there and how the animals get left. So I would pause and just have a closer look at that. Okay. So yesterday we looked at all the different groups of animals, and you're going to need these today, and you're going to need their characteristics that you looked at yesterday to be able to classify them, because you need to know a lot about them. So on the screen I've got the five main species. So we've got mammals, amphibians, fish, reptiles and birds, and I know that you looked at some of them in more depth. You looked at a lot more of animals' characteristics yesterday. So I would suggest that you grab your sheet, your book, whatever you worked those characteristics out in. If you need any help, you can come back to this screen and have a little look. If you feel like maybe you need a little bit of support, then I would pause the video and have a read of the different characteristics of the main groups of animals that we've got here on the screen. Okay, so this is what your task is going to be today. So you're going to classify animals using your own classification key. Now on the screen there is an example of one that I would suggest that you leave up on your screen as you do yours to help you and to support you. You can, if you want to draw animals, draw pictures of the animals, like in the cat one and the animal one we looked at before, but you don't have to. You can just write the animal names in like the example above if you want to. So the key things to remember is you need a question to start it off. The stems coming off of it is always yes or no. Now, if you have got an animal down here, like the lion, that means that the lion's characteristics are yes to all of the previous questions. So yes, it is a cat. Yes, they are a carnivore. Yes, they are a mammal. Be really careful that you don't say, for example, is it a mammal, and say yes, and then come off here and then have some sort of animal that isn't a mammal, because it has to definitely come down the right side of the classification key, and it is trickier than it sounds. When we did it last year, lots of children struggled with it. So it is trickier than it sounds. It might take a couple of attempts to get it right, but that's okay. So you must have something at the end of each yes or no, and it might be another question or it might be the actual animal. So what I would suggest is, first of all, that you pick 2, 4, 6, 8 animals, okay? And the pictures of the animals that we looked at the beginning of yesterday's lesson are up on the website to give you some inspiration of animals that you could use, but you can use any animals that you want. So I would pick 8 of them that you are going to fit into your key. I would write them down at the side of your page or somewhere where you can see them, so that you know where your questions are going. So you need to look at those 8 animals and think about how you're going to classify them, how you're going to get them all onto your key. So your very first question is a really important one. What question could you ask that's very clearly going to split your 8 animals into 2? And then so it's not just any random questions. It's questions that are going to get to the point where you have all of your animals on your classification key. And it might be that you've got lots of questions, more questions than this. It might be that you don't have that many because you can classify them quicker. So the pictures are up on the website to give you some ideas. I would suggest that you leave this screen up for your reference, for your support, to give you an idea of what a classification key looks like, and have a go at doing 1 or 2 or however many you want of your own.